Hello, Dr. Joe here of the drjoe.com and the 2020forum.com. Before I go into the meat of today's presentation, I just want to say something first of all. I have nothing against honey. I am not waging a war against honey. In fact, I do use honey in a few of my recipes, but I use honey on the understanding that honey is just sugar in liquid format, and also on the understanding that the metabolic effects of honey are essentially the same as in table sugar. So that's the message I'm trying to drive across in this series of honey videos. So what are you going to get in today's video? In today's video, I'm going to talk about some of the issues that were raised in the very first video I did regarding honey. And I'm also going to talk about the possible metabolic consequences of excessive honey usage, okay? The key word there is excessive. And I'm also going to give you a few pointers towards the end of the video. So let me start off with some of the issues that were raised in the very first video I did regarding honey. Some of you guys talked about whether the effect of raw honey or manuka honey will be the same as the other regular honey you find on your supermarket shelves. If you watched last week's video, that probably answers your question. I used manuka honey in that video and you saw what manuka honey did to my blood sugar there. The effects are going to be essentially the same whether it's raw honey or manuka honey or your regular pasteurized more processed honey. If there's going to be any difference at all, it's not going to be significant. Okay, so that is the answer to that question. The other issue that was raised was, well, we've been using honey for centuries. Why is it any different today? Well, here's the difference. Our great-great-grandfathers and mothers, our ancestors, yes, they may have used honey in the past and they didn't have any problems with honey. But the essential difference is that our ancestors were really physically active. They worked the soil, they toiled, as opposed to today where our life is sedentary. Basically, we are sedentary beings today. So when you're sitting behind the computer all day, compared to somebody who is actually working the soil, who is doing physical activity, physical labor, they're going to burn off, those people who are doing a lot of physical activities, they're going to burn off the calories and the fructose that does a lot of the damage from the honey. They're going to burn it off. They're not going to accumulate the fat that is going to come from excessive honey usage. So they may have used honey in the past, but because they were so physically active, the honey will not have any debilitating effects on them. But fast forward to today, where we're all sedentary, the effect is going to be different. So that answers that question. The third issue that was raised was, well, the honey is sweeter than sugar, so you're going to be using less. Really? Think about your usage. I think that is self-delusional. From the evolutionary standpoint, by the way, we're attracted to sugar because our ancestors, they didn't know where the next meal was going to come from, so when they saw something sugary, they ate lots of it. But beyond that, the gut is connected to our brain. When we eat something sugary, the neural pathway connected to the brain is triggered, and that leads to dopamine release. Dopamine gives us pleasure. Do you think something that gives you pleasure, you're going to be eating less of it or more of it? I leave that to you. Now, let's talk about the metabolic consequences of excessive honey usage. Before we talk about the metabolic effects, let's talk about what excessive means. Now, the WHO tells us that you are allowed 24 grams of sugar per day. Now, some of the health authorities, they've extended that to 30 grams a day because they want to please the population. Now, so long as you stay within those limits, as in using 24 grams of honey per day or 30 grams of honey per day, you should be fine. So excessive usage refers to consuming more than 30 grams of honey per day. The less you use, the better. And by the way, 1 tablespoonful of honey is 21 grams, just for reference purposes for you there, okay? And here is the most important point that you need to know. It is that if you consume excess amounts of honey, you will by default be consuming excess amounts of fructose. And excess amounts of fructose has unsavory health consequences, which I'll talk about now. Now let's talk about the metabolic consequences of excessive honey usage. So these are the possible metabolic effects of excessive honey consumption. The first one is what we call de novo fat production, which simply refers to synthesis of new fat. And where is this fat going to be dumped? Well, it's going to be dumped underneath the skin and also in and around our internal organs, which leads me to the second possible metabolic effect of excessive honey consumption, which is non-alcoholic fatty liver. Okay, now non-alcoholic fatty liver is reversible, but if you do nothing about it, that will lead to scarring of the liver. And when the liver is scarred, what we call liver cirrhosis, then you know that your health will be taking a big hit. So it is preventable, it is reversible. I will do a special video on non-alcoholic fatty liver sometime in future. So the next metabolic effect of honey consumption would be high triglycerides. Okay, high triglycerides, which is the direct result of fructose metabolism. Okay, now triglycerides are bad news for our health. That much I can say. Okay, so not a very good idea for you to consume too much honey because you're going to end up with high triglycerides. Next possible metabolic effects of excessive honey usage is leptin resistance, which will lead to obesity. Okay, leptin resistance. Let's move on to the next one, and the next one will be insulin resistance. That's the next metabolic effect of excessive honey consumption, insulin resistance, which of course will lead to type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes, and we don't want that. Next metabolic effect of excessive honey usage will be high VLDL. The VLDL, they carry the triglycerides, and of course I told you already that triglycerides are bad news for our health because they will also lead to formation of plaques in our arteries. Okay, plaques in our arteries, which ultimately will result in stiff arteries, and stiff arteries will give us high blood pressure. And high blood pressure, one of the complications is heart disease, another is strokes. So you can see that we're having this steamrolling effect of excessive honey usage leading to all sorts of metabolic issues. So the next one will be high uric acid. Okay, high uric acid. When you got excessive uric acid in the body, that will lead to gout. Okay, gout. You probably know about gout already. I'm going to do a video on gout at some point in future. And then of course, when you have excessive uric acid in the body, that will suppress production of nitric oxide in the body, and that will also lead to high blood pressure. So you got quite a number of factors here that will result in high blood pressure. So honey usage is not that innocent. You have all of these problems that can possibly arise from excessive honey usage. The more of the honey you use, the higher the likelihood that you're going to develop some of these metabolic problems that I've just talked about here. So what should you do? Well, here are a few tips for you. One is you want to reduce the quantity of honey that you use on a daily basis. Personally, I will stick to under 24 grams of honey. Remember, 1 tablespoon of honey is 21 grams. So I will stay under 24 grams. I won't even go up to 30 grams. So reducing the amount is tip number 1. Tip number 2, slow down the absorption of the sugars in the honey. So how can you go about doing that? Well, use fiber with your honey. Combine your honey with fiber. The fiber is going to slow down the sugar absorption and making it easier for your liver to cope. Okay, so the liver doesn't feel overwhelmed with a heavy fructose load and glucose load being delivered suddenly. So that's tip number 2. Tip number 3, I will suggest that you spread your use over the week as opposed to using honey every day it might be a good idea to maybe use honey about 3 times a week. So that way you're giving your liver a bit of a break from all the fructose and the glucose that is being delivered to it from the honey. Don't forget, you're also using some other carbs that will be broken down when they digested your other carbs. That's going to result in fructose and glucose. So honey is just one source of the sugar supply to your liver. So spread your usage over the week. Tip number 4 is for people who've got either diabetes, high blood pressure, or non-alcoholic fatty liver. If you've got any of those conditions or a combination of them, my advice to you will be to avoid using honey altogether. So what should you use instead if you've got any of those conditions? Well, use the healthy sugar substitutes. I've done a video on that before. If you haven't seen that video, I'm going to leave a link right below this video for you to go watch it. And along those lines, I've got some more news for you guys. There's another healthy sugar substitute that I'm looking at the moment. Is looking really good, and I'm going to share it with you guys in the coming weeks. So watch out for that. Just remember that honey is sugar. It's a high calorie food, it's a high carb food. In fact, honey has more calories gram for gram than table sugar. Just something you need to remember. All I'm saying in all of this video series is that honey is just sugar in liquid format, and you should treat it the same. So those are the things that you need to know regarding honey and your health. Hopefully this has been useful. Now, from something that potentially can damage your liver to something that potentially can repair your liver. In the next video, I'm going to be talking about celery, whether you should juice celery or whether you should smoothie celery. So it's going to be celery juice or celery smoothie. That's going to be the subject of the next video. So be on the lookout for that. So hopefully you got some value from this video. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. Please like the video. And also please share this video with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you got any questions, any comments regarding this video, go ahead, leave them down below. I think that's about it. Until next time, this is Dr. Joe signing out.